In this video, we're going to have a look at arguments for the existence of God. Not so much working through the arguments themselves, but just looking at what the standard arguments for the existence of God do and do not establish. The first part of any argument for the existence of God really needs to start with something that's a bit more general than the term specifically God. And really what's required to start with is just to get a basic division. And that basic division is between one side of the line, which is the position held by the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of Homo sapiens who've ever lived over the last 250,000 years, including to today. And that position is one which says that our lived experience and in modern times, our philosophical and scientific investigations require categories beyond the simple, what would it be, the physical, that which can be described in terms of maths and physics, the material. That really, as we live, as we experience each other as humans, as we wrestle with some of the profound life, death and the universe questions, we come to the conclusion that actually just the maths and physics really does not account for everything. Something else is required. And so that's one side of the line. Now the argument then across the other side of the line is with the philosophical materialists. Now it's important that we're technical here because atheist is just not specific enough. Now, okay, it works as shorthand. You get this standard no shortage of them on YouTube, these the great celebrity atheists, the Sam Harrises and Dawkins et al, arguing with Christians. Really, we need something a bit more specific than atheist. We need, because atheists just simply mean you don't believe in the God of theism, which as we move down the line of it, you'll realise theism is a very specific position. So you can be reject the God of theism but still not be a philosophical materialist. So let's be technically correct here. A philosophical materialist is one who says that the entire universe can be explained in terms of the material and can be explained purely in terms of the maths and the physics. Nothing else is required, and so therefore there's a rejection of all concepts like, well, certainly God, a spirit, spiritual, a soul, supernatural, consciousness. All these have gone. And so that's a basic division. And to my mind, there's not a great deal of point in discussing anything outside of that until you've established which side of that line makes the most sense. Now, as we move on from that previous slide and say, well, okay, what are the arguments establishing, as we look and say, okay, so you've established that, sake of argument, you've established that you are on, in the diagram, the right-hand side of the line. So what have you established? Well, what you've mainly established is that you're not a philosophical materialist, and so therefore they've gone. That doesn't really get you very far, though, because all it's done in the arguments, whatever the argument is you're using, you argue for a first cause, you argue for a designer, then all that's done is put you on this side of the line to say you're not a philosophical materialist. Or it might be an argument, say consciousness exists, or the spiritual or spirit, whatever it is. That gets you onto the we're not philosophical materialist side of the line. Or as this is actually the sort of default position for Homo sapiens, it's more a question of saying actually the philosophical materialists have been put outside of that group, and they are forging their own tiny minority view on the other side of the line. The fact it's a tiny minority view, of course, doesn't mean it's wrong, but it's also not the particular line that I'm interested in exploring here. And so we've got this side of the line, but then that's certainly not the end of it, because all you've done there is said, right, okay, we're not philosophical materialists. That still leaves a huge range of options. Okay, so what then is the best hypothesis for explaining, well, life, death and the universe? Okay, so we've got to the right-hand side of the line. Let's assume that we've established that the philosophical materialist position doesn't make sense and they are now out of the way. That doesn't get us very far other than putting us into one particular type of argument. What it has done is it said that well, really all it's done is said the philosophical materialist position makes no sense, that our just our lived experience, our normal interaction with life, which says no, there's something more than this, is actually correct. What it is now then has to be established. So put here, it's just a placeholder, this, I don't know what words we could use, a placeholder then, the divine, ultimate consciousness, you could put great spirit, you could put soul, the soul of the universe, just the oneness of the universe, a whole list of different things you could put in that place. What's needed now is to decide what is the best hypothesis for making sense of this, the divine ultimate consciousness. And that splits into two basic positions. One of them is this monist, pantheist, and the other one is the theist. Let's deal with the monist position first, because that's not one that we're going to explore in any detail. The defining feature of this is that there is just a oneness of absolutely everything, hence monist. There's just a oneness. That oneness has a spiritual dimension to it. Everything ultimately is a manifestation of spirit. Everything is a manifestation of the divine. There is no separation between divine and anything else. So that's the monist position, the pantheist position, and we're going to leave that there because it's the other line that I'm interested in pursuing in this video. Now, the crucial defining feature which distinguishes these two is that the theists say, actually, no, there is a separation. God and the universe are not the same thing. That you've got God, and God then spoke into existence, thought into existence. That really doesn't matter at this stage. God created somehow the universe, which is separate from God, and God sustains that universe. That's the defining difference between theists and monists. That's quite a complicated discussion. I'm not going into it here, but that's a discussion then which needs to take place to sort out which of those two paths you're then going to go down. Now, to repeat what I've already said, there's absolutely no point whatsoever in the philosophical materialist getting involved in that discussion because there's a disagreement at the very fundamental level, because as far as the philosophical materialist is concerned, both the theist and the monist are discussing absolutely nothing. They're discussing that which is completely meaningless. So this then is thrashing out the refinement of this side of the line as to what is it that is beyond the maths and the physics of the material realm. Okay, let's divide that. So I've got theism there in inverted commas as a placeholder. We can now divide that and actually put theism in there without the inverted commas and be technical, because we do need a bit of a distinction to be made between theism and deism as we go down this line. And there we've got theism. This is God is personal. God interacts with the world. So this is going to be going down that Judeo-Christian line, the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity and Islam, which says that God is a personal God. God interacts with the world. And in terms of Christianity, God is pretty hands-on. God is so hands-on as far as Christians are concerned that you've got God incarnate, that God as this man Jesus came, lived amongst men just as an ordinary man. Well, wasn't quite ordinary, was he? Because he was God according to that Trinitarian theology. Deism says that no, God is impersonal. God has no interest particularly in interacting with the world. Prayer doesn't influence God. Prayer influences us. That God basically set this world, set the universe in motion, and then just let it run. So the main thing we've got here is to see that at each stage along the way there is a division. So at the beginning, everybody, whether you're a Buddhist, you're a Hindu, you're a Sikh, you're a Muslim, you're a Christian, you're a Jew, you're a Platonist, you're probably an Aristotelian, anything at all, African traditional religion, you're a pagan up at Stonehenge celebrating the solstice, it doesn't matter. All of those are on the same side of that line, and all of them together should be working together to say that actually the philosophical materialist position really doesn't make sense. They then get moved out of the discussion. You then have another division then between the monists and the theists, so you divide there. You then, within theism, you're dividing then between, or theism sort of placeholder, and theism, real theism and deism. Now we could continue this, we could wander off down the theism line and start threshing out the difference in theological understanding of God between Judaism, Christianity and Islam. And you could keep refining. But the main thing really in looking at this is to say that the way that the discussions fairly standardly take place, and no shortage of them on YouTube, where you've got the atheist versus the Christian, which is really what we're looking at. If it's your Sam Harris Dawkins type, you're looking at the philosophical materialist versus the Christian. That really is not the most sensible place to have that discussion, because the philosophical materialist could roundly defeat the Christian, but still not even remotely establish that the philosophical materialist is the most sensible position, because the Christian then is only one facet of theism, and theism is only one facet of the early one, the theism in inverted commas. And theism is only one facet of a belief in this idea that you need some sort of ultimate consciousness. And so really, in having these discussions about the existence of God, it's worth really making sure that you've got a good understanding of exactly where in this in these stages that you are having this discussion, and what it is that you're establishing, and what it is that is established if in fact your own position is defeated. So looking at that in a little bit more detail, and looking at that specifically in the context of Christianity. And so, okay, there's a discussion then about Jesus, and Jesus being the Son of God is an absolutely central component of Christianity. So it's Christianity, and there's a defeat that says, no, Jesus was not the Son of God. Okay, he's not in any way divine. Okay, right, so Christianity has collapsed. That doesn't move you all the way back over and over that black line to the philosophical materialist position. What it does, it then puts you in the territory of Judaism and Islam. You then have another discussion which would look at whether that position makes sense. That's theism with a God who has revealed. They've both got books, they've both got scriptures, which they consider, although radically different understandings of the term, they both consider those books are revelations of God. They don't think that Jesus is divine, and so therefore they're not affected at all by Jesus not being the Son of God. Okay, so the next one then is, right, okay, somebody manages to convince them that theism makes no sense. All right, we'll see you've gone over the next yellow line. You're still nowhere near that black line going into philosophical materialism. What you are then is you're then potentially into deism. And so we've got this very abstract sort of creator God. Okay, next argument says then that actually no, that separation doesn't make sense. Separating the divine and the universe makes absolutely no sense. You've done across the black line to the philosophical materialist. At where you are now, you're in monism. And of course, it's important to remember that at each stage along that line, everybody to the left, all the positions to the left, are against the position that you're arguing. So as you look at Christianity there, Judaism and Islam are opposed to Christianity, deism is opposed to Christianity, monism is opposed to Christianity. Judaism and Islam, you stop there. Okay, well, deism is opposed to that. Monism is opposed to that. So it's all the way through. It's making sure that it's understanding what is being established. So if my Christian position is defeated, it's not an argument for philosophical materialism. And just to throw some others in here, somewhere in that on that side of the black line, you've got Platonism, you've got panpsychism, you've just got the acceptance that there is something called consciousness, which cannot be explained in purely material terms, as we currently tend to understand the term materialism. Now, these arguments for the existence of God are quite interesting, but it's very important to understand what they are doing, what they're able to establish, and very importantly, what they're not able to establish, and what a defeat of one of those arguments for the existence of God actually means. Where does that place the person on that that set of lines there? Does the defeat of the argument for the existence of God put you on the other side of the black line into the philosophical materialist camp? Probably not. It probably just simply shifts you further over in that direction into one of those other positions.